Thank y'all for entertaining the 5-minute recess. I know I appreciate it. So, back to where I started. This will be the third time now. We have a matrix in front of you, and we have the definitions of the different areas from the 5 zones in front of you. I think this is a good place to start conversation and discussion. I do want to remind everyone that at our last meeting, this matrix does not apply, as we did vote at the last meeting to make the county half-acre countywide, period. So that is where we are currently sitting coming out of committee. So as we do have conversation and discussion and we look at the matrix, just remember that is where we're currently sitting.
That's a minimum countywide, right? So the quarter-acre thing here wouldn't apply, and the eighth acre wouldn't apply.
That's correct.
But the 1 and 2,
well, there's no guarantee that it's 1 or 2. If I want to do half acres, I can do half acres anywhere I want in the county. And so we discussed, because we made it painfully clear multiple times tonight that this sheet of paper is just a sheet of paper, and this sheet of paper is just a sheet of paper, because we haven't actually ever voted to adopt this sheet of paper or this sheet of paper. We currently have a map with 5 colors, or 6 colors if you count protected areas.
So, make a motion, top 2 lines, as is.
So I have a motion that we adopt the top 2 lines of the matrix as is. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
I have a second. Discussion on that.
I'll just tell you, that's 85% of my area, and it is amenable to what I think the folks up there wanted. People up in the Dacusville, Nine Forks area. I've specifically, Amy Williams on the school board, she represents up there, and she was pretty clear that she'd love to see 2 acres in her area and 1 acre a little bit south of there. You know, obviously there's some darker blue, I guess, but those 2 lines right there seem to describe what I think most folks would like in that region. That gives Alex, for most of his area, 2 acres, which is what he asked for over and over again for 183.
Mr. Chairman, one thing on the grid. The grid represents a time when the impact fees were coupled with this, and they're no longer coupled. You decoupled them at the last meeting. So just to make clear that that's not part of the motion, that we wouldn't understand that to be part of the motion.
Okay, I'm in my motion.
And then
top 2 lines, sands, impact fees.
Yeah, and the stormwater aspect, that part is still being studied by a consultant for a handbook, implementation handbook. We anticipate that's exactly the way that it's going to go, but that's a very simple, gross simplification. So,
sands the last 2 columns.
Councilman Sennedy, you second that?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion.
I have a question for staff.
Ms. Lundberg.
I have trouble seeing the profitability of any developer ever doing 50% open space with 2 acre lots. Are there any examples of anywhere in the state that y'all know of a development that's 50% open space and 2 acre lots?
Development I live in.
Is it a subdivision?
That I live in, yeah. You know, here's the problem with Highway 11. If you talk to a developer up there, and I've talked to people that built my subdivision, built Newtown Mountain, a couple other ones, you could not find, let's say, 10 building sites in 5 acres. You just couldn't. They're so far spread out. So what happens is, you could say the minimum is a half an acre, but the reality is it's 1.5 to 4 acres. That's the minimum. And there is just, now, is it 50% set aside in one place? Probably not.
That's my.
But I can tell you the lot that I own on Doe Run, I would say it's 5 acres and probably 1/4 acres developable. That's it. The rest of it's just ravines and hills, and there's plenty of open space. You just, you know, unless you want to move earth,
right,
massive amounts, it's already implied.
So to me, that absolutely supports what staff recommended last time, which is that in that top zone, what we're calling Appalachian Heritage, it all be master planned that are each individually considered. Because in some pieces of land, it may make sense that it's a 2 acre lot or a 3 acre lot. In some pieces of land, they're going to want to say, no, I don't care if you think you can do this. We don't want you moving that amount of topography. That's too much land to move. That doesn't reflect the space. rather than having this be what's kind of weird, 50% absolutely set aside, would describe what open space is and how it needs to be adjacent to other open space and what we want there and how much can be developed. I mean, all those rules have been talked about in this meeting. I don't think this is ever going to get done, which maybe I know is your point, but I like staff recommendation of keeping this as master planned communities only that are each discussed individually by planning commission, because the topography up there is so different, and because it will be reflected differently, and because open space on one may be different than one that happens to have a huge rock cropping and forest that works as open space but may not officially meet some definition of our subdivisions. So I think because of the interesting topography, because all the spots are differently, because the mountainside is differently, and because we don't want people destroying topography, leaving that as everything in that zone is a master plan community that has to pass the planning commission on a by choice basis is a safer way to protect it.
You know, well, I would agree with you if we had that Highway 11 zone, 1 mile upward. That's where you're gonna get a master plan. Nobody's gonna build a master plan on Midway Road. They're just not. So when you require master plans in that whole area, that lower section, you won't have one development built.
That's what you want, isn't it?
No, no, I'm honest. I'm just being honest with you.
I have a question for you, Alex. The space up here right at Highway 11, you're talking about in the map we just approved. You're talking about this light blue line, and you liked that light blue line that went parallel to the Highway 11 corridor there.
I prefer what we have now.
Yep.
But I mean, if you're gonna have master plans, you have to limit it to a small area.
I mean, that could be a motion, right? We could just add that strip of it in there, and you could do the master plan thing. The deal is, though,
Yeah.
he's talking about 11, and he's talking about a snake farm up on Highway 11, right? For me, the place that's most important to me is, I mean, I don't have a bunch of places that are snake farms. I'm talking about, like, historically agricultural areas up there in the, in the Dacusville region and Crossroads. It's as flat as you can get. I mean, it's a real easy place to build. But most of the folks up there would really, really like to pee off their porch without a witness. So at the end of the day, I'd like to have it 2 acres of land. I don't have a problem with that. The snake farms, it might be 5 acres to be able to build. But if you want to do the master plan, you have that better, then let's just do the whole time.
She was arguing for the master plan. I explained why it didn't make sense. Because the area got so big. If it was such a small area, it might have made sense.
So can I, just for a point of clarification for myself, when I looked at the original 5-zone map and the 3 fingers, where's Masters Road, which you use as the example, where does it fall?
It's Midway Road.
Midway Road, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's north of,
Is it in one of those 3 fingers?
No,
It's just below the 3 fingers.
What is your, the 50% open space used for in your?
Well, so the reason I asked,
The school's a little cross hatched.
so the reason
Yep.
Across from City Lane.
And somebody just pointed out on the big map.
so it kind of runs down that. The only reason I ask is if you look at the big difference between Ag Heritage and Appalachian is, the Ag Heritage allows for your open space subdivision. Now, it's only 40%, not 50%, and it's an acre, not 2 acres, which is all up for debate. But it doesn't say you have to do a master plan. The areas, like Ms. Linville was arguing, not arguing, but stating, there's a lot of areas that is north of there that's not in those fingers that you're not going to master plan would actually fit very well, which I would imagine that's where staff was going when they made all these recommendations. So, for me to have this epiphany 9 months later is just crazy. But I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly.
yeah, I think his motion's fine.
Any other discussion on that motion?
The motion was for the top 2 to go through, is that right?
Top 2 of the first 5 columns.
Vice Chairman.
And one else, and I don't know what this means. What does it say in the language that you put in y'all's definition sheet? Under the, not under the Appalachian, under the agricultural heritage, remove the 5,000 square foot lot size option.
That's if you're on sewer, you can get the smaller, it would remove it. No, this is.
Different, the motion.
That's very
It's different than the motion.
No, well, I wondered why that was in there, because the 40% open space is there, but then you had that in there
Well, because the way it exists now is you would be able to, if you were on public sewer, you would be able to have the smaller 1/8 acre lot.
Hey.
Yeah, and so that is saying, okay, if we're talking about it being an agricultural heritage area, let's take that option off the table for that area. So you can't have that whether sewer's available or not.
That would make it half-acre minimum. Correct.
Actually, under the motion that's on the table, the way it's passed now, yeah, 1/2 acre, but the motion under the table, that area would be 1 acre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Too much definition.
I like some of the verbiage in this. But I understand. Other discussion?
I don't know at what time we do the process. On the November 20th Cal packet, the Appalachian Heritage Area, which we've gotten rid of, or changed, that's when it was smaller, has implied the industrial use prohibition and commercial development language in existing Highway 11 corridor to this expanded heritage area. Are we going to, as we do these discussions on subdivisions, also talk about where industrial and commercial can go?
That's not in the motion, no. No, the Highway 11 ordinance 617 does not change at all, so that's still enforced.
Right, but there was a recommendation from staff on the 3 map that we've now made 5 map that expands the prohibition on industrial and commercial mirroring what the Highway 11 corridor was into the entire area.
Actually, it doesn't, because nobody's made a motion that we adopt this language at all.
Right. So I'm asking, is this the right time to also bring in where industrial and commercial go?
I think what they would, they can speak for themselves. What they were trying to do was, at least from what I could tell, is when it was 1 mile south of 11 up to North Carolina, they were going to try to eliminate that original definition, which was the view, which you can see, and just make it a complete area.
Just that. Not this.
Which made sense if that's what you were going to continue with. But this area is so much larger, you can't really do that now.
Okay, I'll table my discussion until a different time.
There's
That makes
already a
sense.
description of what industrial
I'm
is.
trying to make that simple.
And the Highway 11 thing references what's light
I
industrial
think
and
would
light
make
industrial.
sense. We would have just done that.
And then we can certainly, at some point, send that to we can send things, by what we pass, we can send things to the planning commission as well.
Okay. Right now, we're only voting on subdivisions.
We're actually only voting on
2,
districts.
Open
Top
space.
2 lines.
top 2, but this only applies to subdivisions.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Any other discussion on that? I think that it's nipping. I'm just gonna share my thoughts. I think that voting on this is just nipping, but I do think there's good language. I think that we're doing somewhat of a disservice, not my area, even though I try to represent the entire county. I think we're doing somewhat of a disservice by blanketing, but it's okay. The agricultural heritage area does affect parts of your district and parts of your district as well. But I believe that it gives you some of the protections that you wanted from the previous discussions. So I do think there is a bigger picture. I think I'll just say that. I'll leave it at
So can I ask a question following on what Ms. Linville said? This sheet, I think a lot of us have, don't have issues with this. The simplification that you're talking about, to me, this is just a high level, like, bullet points. And by doing 2 acres, I don't have to worry about it all being half, and I don't run it all, half in that area. But if you look at some of the things for the Appalachian Heritage Area, some of that language, the industrial prohibition in the northern portion of the county, there's a Milliken plant out there, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, there's some other facilities like that. There's a food manufacturing, or at least a facility for it. Some of those things I think that we need to be discussed in a lot more depth before we start to apply those prohibitions. Is that?
That would be for new.
Say again?
That would be for new, somebody wants to come,
Yeah.
existing things should be,
Right.
okay?
Right, yeah, but the Ellison plant, somebody decides to come in there and buy the land beside it and build a plant and then use that for warehouse, then we'd be completely prohibiting that. And industrial's, out there already.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? good measure. I'll make the motion that we adopt the other 3 rows on the matrix. Ask for a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, so you're saying that, in the gateway, it's going down to 1/8 of an acre, 1/4 of an acre in the community, along with those 20-30%?
That's just the motion I have on the table.
Oh, okay, I'm still talking, okay. Well, I mean, I'm still of the opinion that the 1/2 acre is about as low as I want to go. Especially on, excuse me, on the community. Now, I mean, if we're gonna talk about the smaller areas that are in black and changing that lot size there, then I'm open for discussion on that, but.
I'd like to make a motion for those bottom 3 to be in concord with the 3 descriptions we have on this sheet.
So you're making a substantive motion?
Substitute motion, instead of what you have them in yours, I can substitute.
So the substantive motion to not adopt the 3 columns, but adopt the 3 definitions laid out in the supporting documents we received tonight. And it was in the packet on the table tonight.
Was it?
It was.
I second that.
So I have a second to the
You should have
substantive
also
motion.
had it at the last week's meeting.
Huh?
It's the same information
Same information that I had on the other one?
from last
last
week's
week.
meeting. It just
Yeah.
got
This one?
pretty colors added.
One benefit is it would prevent us from having to vote bullet point by bullet point for each type of
Thank you.
property, and would put them all through in one vote.
So discussion on the substantive motion.
I like my motion. I'm gonna vote for it.
Are you,
It's your shortest speech of the night.
are you sure with that motion, Megan? Megan, you good with that motion? Okay. Other discussion?
Now, is this for the matrix? And we haven't got into the actual details of this page?
The substantive motion says ignore that and pick up
And adopt
this. That's correct.
For the natural, community, and gateway.
I have some density issues with community and gateway.
Okay.
So just, could you clarify which page we're voting on? Is it this one with the 5 areas?
Yes.
Okay, and what is included and what isn't?
The bottom 3, which are the 3 that are left on the 5 map.
Okay, the top 2 are what we approved before, right?
That's correct.
I'm sorry.
For me, the drawback to it, right, is Ms. Nimble doesn't get quite, the lot size provisions for higher density next to the area. But like she said a second ago, we get to avoid having to down tiny anthills over the whole thing.
My understanding is that we're passing the definition of these colors, and then we will still have time to add colors to the map. So that's why.
Okay.
But this is, the granularity of this covers so much more ground than the sheet over here.
Which is literally what I was trying to say about the top 2 rows.
I didn't like this one over here because
This would be
it had one thing in there that I didn't think we could.
The language is the same.
Okay.
Other discussion?
To be clear,
Yes, sir.
you knew I was gonna ask,
100%.
but what we'll be voting on is not this, this,
That is correct.
adopting this,
That's correct.
as is.
Unless you want to amend something. That's correct.
There would still be opportunity, Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, to make sure we understand on the staff side, for y'all to adjust where the colors are on the map.
That's
This would
correct.
just be where,
That
This
is,
is the definition
that
of
is
the color.
correct. Kind of like we talked about the other, what do you call it?
yeah,
the other
I
areas.
tried to use a G in there and there was no way to do it.
Please do something.
So there is still, but literally, not saying that this can't be tweaked, but this is the ideas behind the color.
So Chris, if we approve it, the very next thing could be an amendment to change a line item, right?
That makes sense?
Or we could, as we go through this, each of us could make edits, propose edits to this existing item.
Don't like the idea of 5-story. I think we need to stay with 3 max. What are you reading?
Where's that at?
Okay, good.
You want to stay with what?
3 stories instead of 5.
Is that a limit that we have? Is that part of the, is that part of the?
3 stories is the limit.
3 stories is currently the limit. The 5 would depend on whether it can be serviced by a fire station or not.
Okay.
So they'd have to have a ladder truck.
But they'd have to follow all the building code stuff, and it'd have to be sprinkled, that's right.
Question.
So that means the only area that would affect is central. They would have to have a ladder truck? I mean, what's the requirement for a 5-story ladder truck? Do they have a ladder truck?
Yes.
Central does.
Clemson
Because of Clemson.
Pickens does too.
Yeah, Pickens City does now too.
Because of mutual aid with Clemson,
And Eastland has too.
Yeah, fire chief would still have to sign off.
So I do have another question. If we were, and this is a staff level question, because I know we've had this conversation in the past where somebody wanted to build something that didn't meet with the UDSA and brought it to ask for approval, if you will. Is there a way that if we say 3, but somebody wants a 5-story building, for it to come before planning commission for approval, or does that mean that it's out?
Was the master plan development.
Yeah, it could be done as a master plan development, or they could apply to Board of Appeals.
So yes, the answer is yes. There's a couple of avenues they can still follow it that say 3 instead of 5.
So I'll make the motion that we take it from 5 back down to 3 where we currently stand. Do I have a second on that? Amendment.
Second.
I have a second by Councilman Laws. Discussion on the amendment.
What's the basis for making it 3 versus 5? If you can only do it where they can fire service it, and it has to be sprinkled. I think that's the law. What's the basis for doing 5 versus 3? It decreases the amount of acreage that's going to be used for per unit households. Sprawl.
Right, it allows for apartments in a place where we decided if you already are saying it's okay to have apartment complexes, 5 versus 3 is not gonna change the look and feel of the area. It's going to allow more people to have homes.
Let me hire.
It will be higher, that's true. I believe Clemson is just allowed 7 stories with the downtown hotel. It was 5 stories for the city, and then they made that exception for 7. Yeah, so Clemson's currently at 5 stories. So,
With the bottom story being retail or commercial.
in the mixed use ones, yeah.
Also have another.
Any other discussion on the amendment?
So just repeat it again.
The amendment is to take it from 5 stories back down to 3 stories.
In the Gateway corridor,
Yes, sir.
in both multifamily and mixed use?
Yes, sir. That is correct. Knowing that there is a process for approval of 5 stories, it's more, goes along with the master plan mentality.
Just for point of clarification, in the community center, it has a max of 4. So.
I'm not there yet. Other discussion?
I was heading that way.
So the reason why I asked what the reason was, right, other than you just don't like it, is because it doesn't necessarily reflect a risk that I have in my area. I don't believe, except for maybe over on the 123 corridor. So I would just ask them, like, why is, if it's not for health and human safety provisions, then what's the reason?
It isn't. Then I see what you're saying too about higher, less.
I mean, like I went back to the very beginning, like if we're trying to avoid sprawl, and it's an apartment complex, you know, I mean, does it make that big of a, okay, first of all, you all see how I'm built. I'm not walking up 5 flights of stairs, so I'm never living there. So it's never gonna come back here. I'm just asking, like, what's your argument?
Well, it's not, my fear is, I don't want this to turn from single family to now they're gonna focus on multifamily and townhomes, and we're gonna get bombarded with those.
Oh, I talked to major developers, and they're like, you know, single family, 1,000 square foot with 2 bathrooms and 2 beds, apartment complexes is where the most bang for the buck for rental properties is at. So I mean, we're not going to so far we've not done anything against that because we're not changing annexation laws.
Other discussion. So this being, I do want to point out, this being in the Gateway Corridor, which is the dark black area on the maps, and it wouldn't be anywhere else, allowing for the 5 stories, and that is minimal space. And there are provisions in place that do require fire. I do know in the Croswell community several years ago, someone talked about building something, and they were going to have to buy $1 million ladder truck for the fire department in order to build it, and they didn't build it.
Right, going up 135, there's a little space right there near the neighborhood on the left going out of the channel. What's that called? It looks like, I don't know if it is or not, but is that black right there?
Yeah, it's black.
We need to count this way.
Okay.
The north of Easley, that's the only black. Well, no, there's a little bit.
There's down on the southern end.
So that's the area space right around Birdine Springs.
And I think one of my biggest anxieties there is I don't see a 5-story building fitting at Birdine Springs. Also, that's not my district by a quarter of a mile, but I still don't, I pass it on the regular, and I don't see a 5-story building going there.
But a 3-story building works, like, I think Henry's point is big, like, if you already have a 3-story apartment complex,
Not there, you don't.
well, if you're allowing for a 3-story, is a 5 that much worse, it's every one that much more. So again, knowing that they have to match the traffic rules, they have to do all the stuff that we already put in place,
That's true.
that we did to protect, to make sure it's not gonna overly tax it. We've already passed a lot of things about how it affects traffic, how open space has to be there. We've already made sure these are attractive, they are not a burden on the area. They will all be paying taxes, so you have, revenue coming in a smaller amount of space. It's sort of by the same thing. Having 5 instead of 3 does not burden the county anymore, does not burden the area, or if it did, they'd have to pay for those adjustments. So it sounds to me like everyone's either talking about visual, just not liking it, or just the general anti-people approach.
I understand what you're saying. And thinking about it that way, and I do forget, like many people, that we have talked about, traffic can't, if the roads, the infrastructure can't support it, you gotta improve it in order to be able to do it. And it's easy to forget that when you're thinking, because you think about how many you can get in a 5-story building versus a 3-story building, you get a lot more. But if the roads can't support it, you can't. Or you'd have to upgrade all the roads and infrastructure.
And we don't have that piece.
That's in there, right? That was the second reading.
What's
Yeah,
in,
that's in there, we voted for it.
what's in what?
The infrastructure upgrades
Oh, yeah.
on the developer.
And if we put an impact fee, you get an impact fee for every room, not building, room, or unit. If we pass it.
Other discussion there on that amendment?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Henry from 7 minutes ago that said all the crazy stuff didn't realize Birdine Springs was black. So at what point can Henry from 5 minutes ago make an amendment to change that color to the community center area? I have to wait till we're done with the entire 3 here to make the change.
I would prefer that for.
Let the photographic record reflect that Henry was making that motion near term.
Okay. Actually, I'd like to, pull back my amendment on the Gateway Corridor area. I understand the point you're making on, especially on the Gateway Corridor area. Especially knowing that we have the protection areas in the area, the highway 8 area and those kinds of things. We have that option. So I will withdraw my amendment, David.
Please restate the amendment that you're withdrawing.
I'm withdrawing my amendment to change it from 5 stories to 3 stories in the Gateway Corridor area.
So ultimately, that would mean that the only areas it really affects is going to be over there in the portion of the community that would like to have higher density development.
That's correct.
This is beautiful, particularly after, again, I make that change in a few minutes. All right.
So any other discussion of their Gateway Community Center or natural heritage area?
I have a question for staff.
Yes, ma'am.
The do not allow RVs as dwelling units, could you tell me what the thought was that you don't want? The reason I'm asking this is because I received some feedback from the public about RVs being used to house people on their properties, like in a backyard. Has been, and we talked about that, I believe we talked about Roy's mother-in-law quite a bit. Why was the choice decided that Roy's mother-in-law can't live in an RV in his backyard in these two areas?
So that actually would still be allowed because it's a family member and it's not the primary dwelling unit.
Okay.
But for just a single piece of property and that's the only dwelling unit on the property, our thought was to have those in the areas where there's more land.
So it's just a, the space the property, the take up on land. Does that apply to tiny homes as well, since we're treating tiny homes as RVs? You couldn't put a tiny home in your backyard?
Only if it is a family that lives in it.
Okay, so this,
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman.
just as point of order, I'm not putting my mother-in-law in an RV. Because she will watch this and think I'm doing it.
We all heard you out there in the hallway. Mima's out.
I'm not gonna be able to go home.
Other discussion.
The motion, again, what?
To adopt those three areas as the verbiage around those three
You
areas
drop the idea of changing the height.
on the Gateway Corridor area. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Dr. Wilson?
So we're done with these three?
So we just-
That was it? That was all the amendments? That's wonderful. I'd like to change the area right here at Verdun Springs to be contiguous with the spaces beside it.
point of order.
Yeah.
We just voted on the amendment to use the bullet point from your original motion, which was to do the next three things on them.
So the substitute
It was a
motion,
substitute, okay, I'm sorry.
yes, that is correct. That is correct. So
Didn't realize I
the
changed it.
Appalachian Heritage Area and the Agricultural Heritage Area, we decided on the top two rows of the matrix. On the Natural Heritage Area, the Community Center area, and the Gateway Corridor area, we voted on utilizing the verbiage that is listed here and not the matrix.
Okay, I didn't realize it was substitute, thank you.
Dr. Wilson?
I'd like to make a motion that the black area there in Verdun Springs, currently listed as Gateway Corridor area, because of the nature of that particular area and the way that it abuts to a traditional 50s and 60s style development space, and then is also rural, I would like to make that a community center area versus a Gateway Corridor area.
I'll second that motion. Discussion on that motion.
From my understanding, this map was done based on your 9-point matrix that you came up with the 5 hands and all the voting. So that was identified through our voting and staff running the map as an area that met all of the requirements. But again, this is your area, not mine. But you're saying even though we all voted on that, we voted on the matrix, staff did the work, GIS double checked it, we smoothed it. In your opinion, it doesn't apply.
Oh, just based on the, what do lawyers call it when somebody makes a decision and then you have to follow it for the rest of your lives?
Precedent.
Yeah, just based on the precedent we had tonight, I'm going to change that particular area specifically because I think that moving it up one bump will be better reflective of what that area is already voted as. But precedent.
So for the just point, is I support that, especially knowing that this is a living document that may change in a year or the year after.
Yep.
To your point of precedent, the 3 fingers, we changed those. Now, we saw what happened when we changed those. It totally limited open space and this and the other, but that's what the representation from the area feels like that suits it, and I respect that. So I do, knowing that it is a living document, at this moment in time, I do believe there could be growth that direction in whatever the next 20 years, But at this moment in time, I do understand exactly what you're saying, and I've heard that from the constituents that live in that area.
The other piece of it too is, if you ever been to Brown Springs,
Yes.
I mean, there's 7 square inches of flat in that whole community basically, except for where they scoured the ground. And so with a lot of the provisions that we're adding here and whatnot, I mean, that little space right there is minuscule, right? And it's hilly, there's some apartment complex over there, and as soon as you turn right, going back towards Brown Springs from the hospital, I think it would be difficult to do high density development in the area, in the spirit of what the Gateway Corridor would mean. I would have anticipated there'd been a little bit more of that, like the dog bone thing that we had before, going up towards the left. I don't think the Brown Springs area is the right place for that.
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Other discussion?
I think, and this really has more to do, well, with you and I both. Whatever this odor thing is we're doing, around Highway 8, and I don't know enough about the map. I can't speak intelligently enough about it, but I would like to make a motion to ask staff to show us what this protection layer, I don't want to call it odor anymore, I don't want to call it, this protection layer that's going to be on Highway 8 to the, based on what the feedback we've gotten from the people who live in that area.
So that I'll understand, because
I'll second his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. The idea of the odor is it moves it back a level, or is it something other than that?
It offers the layer of, and it knocks it back it would knock it back, well, it's already knocked back a level in some places though. I just want to make sure that that area is protected until the infrastructure is in place.
And again, I'm not weighing on the merits of this, but you could just move it.
Move the line?
For Dr. Wilson's earlier motion, this is going to be a living document. It's going to get reviewed once a year. That accomplishes the odor without having to go through that complexity.
All right then.
The reason my original intention with the ODRA was to give each one individual areas the ability to kind of make the designation and then to say what would have to change before it could be adjusted. Right, and then there's accountability over the long term from a planning perspective to having to actually quantify or qualify that change. That's why I wanted to have that, because yours is going to be different than his.
Yeah.
When I originally did it, it moved it up to the next strictest area until, but if if the next strictest area is not going to work for you, like in the 8 area, then yeah, change the categorization. But I'll just give you an example.
Actually, I'm gonna withdraw the motion. I'm trying to get to a final thing that we can vote on, but I would like to know what that looks like.
Talking about south of Easley on Highway 8.
Yeah.
Which is now listed as community center area on one side of the road and natural heritage on the other.
Right.
So here's the genesis of the reason why the ODRA. If you're on the coast and a hurricane comes through, or we have a tornado that comes through and damages sewer area, and so it's going to take us 7 years to rebuild the sewer plant. You're going to suspend all development in that area until sewer plant's rebuilt, right? So if you're, same way in the coast, right? You'd have to suspend and not allow until you can service it. So for me, there's a flexibility in that with regards to the planning group. So then you can come back and say, hey, all right, now we rebuilt the sewer plant, the ODRA has been removed, carry on. And then that's equally as risky as you've got a road that's too narrow and you've got too much traffic and blah, blah, blah.
So I would, I guess I need a motion to change the areas designated, or is that something that, what is the thoughts on, because I don't remember the exact language of what we said about the ODRA. But I do believe like that area south of Easley, there at the Anderson County line, some of it is Gateway Corridor area, some of it's community center area. I don't think any of it can tolerate Gateway Corridor area. And I definitely don't think the 8 Sheriffville Road area can handle even some of the community center area at this moment in time. A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, maybe. which is the living document piece of it.
Can I make a suggestion for a motion? For 1 mile on both sides of Highway 8, to cover the majority of it, this is just to start to move it to natural heritage area designation.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. Discussion on that.
Just Highway, Mr. Chairman, so we're getting our notes right, just Highway 8 south of Easley.
South of West End Elementary School.
That's correct.
Because
So it's easier to say south of 135.
You can check, tell me one more time.
The motion on the table is to designate 1 mile either side of Highway 8 south of 135 as natural heritage area.
135 turns right there, West End.
That's correct.
That's going to
Anderson County.
less dense
Goes to natural heritage, which would be
from
Down
what?
135.
Some of it's community center and some of it's gateway.
Easley High School, basically.
And you changed it to natural.
That's correct.
along the
Just
road.
because right now it's the same purpose as this ODRA. Is that right?
That's correct.
In the sense that the infrastructure is not gonna, you already know it's not there, it's not gonna support it. And until the infrastructure is put in place to support it, then you could reconsider, but right now, it doesn't make any sense. And that directly reflects what the people who live there say. Look, if I could come out and drive and there's 4 lanes and I can get to where I wanna go to, cool, but right now even the teachers go for a meeting at the high school, and they go, it takes us an hour and a half to get there. And it's because of the traffic.
That's right.
So I'd like to make an amendment to the motion to make it the agricultural heritage, because half acre is not going to stop all the growth there. Half acre is not going to be a strict enough move to keep the growth from coming to that area. Because I think that.
So I do, and I have an amendment on the table, motion to amend on the table. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a second. So here's my argument against that. You still have to do all the infrastructure upgrades. You still have to widen Highway 8. You still have to widen Sheriff Mill Road. Sewer is an issue in that area, and I do know that, which means the reality of it, the gateway would probably still work because you'd have to do all those things. But the spirit of it, I think that the argument that the half acre is not going to limit, I do think it's going to limit because you're not going to be willing to spend the millions of dollars. And if we are, then we get a 5-lane road out of Highway 8, right? And Sheriff Mill Road, which would be phenomenal, because we're beyond needing it. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying.
I retract my motion. Fair enough.
Other discussion.
So where are we now in the motion?
I retracted it.
Okay, where are we at? So what was your motion to restate it?
My motion is 1 mile either side of Highway 8, south of 135, to be changed to the, what we say, natural heritage area. Any other discussion on that motion?
Can we ask the staff to look and see if there's a natural road division where you could just take it all the way to that road instead of my neighbors who get space but I'm not? Is that amenable to you, Chris?
Absolutely.
So approximately one mile, and then.
Do you want us to include full parcels? Or
That'd be great.
So the one thing that we've talked about in the past is that for your own areas, go review that, so it's not, bisecting something, so, review it, right?
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Any other motions or discussion? I would like to bring up that for the Gateway Corridor and Community Center Corridor, natural heritage automatically falls at a half acre. But the Gateway Corridor and the Community Center area, they're both at a half acre still based on our vote at the last meeting.
Wait, could you say that again?
We don't have lot sizes listed on this sheet, correct?
looking for.
Yes, because it says leave in the existing UDSO, which means that had a lot size.
Oh, it does, don't it? Yeah, okay. I apologize. That was misunderstanding on my part. Other discussion?
I have a question on the map. I don't know, I'm gonna just walk. Okay, so the Grange is on 123. That's the name of this huge development. It has recently been annexed by Clemson, one part of it, but it's
One part of
three
it, the
parts.
second
So
part.
the expectation is that all three parts are gonna be annexed by Clemson? Is that what this blue island is right here? Because there's like, this is Clemson municipality and here's a blue island.
She's right.
I think that's correct, yes.
So that blue island's gonna be Clemson soon? Well, if the grade, sorry,
I'm not saying it's not.
right,
I'm not saying it is. Y'all want a choice to, you want to give developers an option that's comparable of whether or not to annex.
right.
You keep it this way, it'll be in Clemson, or not in the county.
Okay, thank you. That's my segue I'm going for. So right now, this is not even, so I'm down here looking just north of Clemson on 123, which is one of where we think infrastructure is gonna happen. It is happening. The Grange is going up right here, which if y'all haven't driven by is a sea of homes, lots and lots and lots of homes. So that area is leaning to me towards community center, but right now it's colored as natural heritage, which means they're not gonna be allowed, which means they're gonna immediately annex into Clemson if they can. And then now we have a bunch of homes on 123, which to me is a great place to be developing because it's servicing this area, which is where our growth is happening fastest. So I would like to propose this whole chunk here where this is already black and this is black, but then it jumps to natural heritage and totally skips over community center. So I would like this whole area to become community center. That's my motion.
I think part of that area is in my district,
I know.
north of 123. and
I know.
don't want that. They don't want that
So I
black.
have a motion on the table, so I have a second for the motion. So I'll second for sake of discussion.
Part of that's my district, that's the
Councilman
green,
Wallace.
it's partially mine.
Councilman Lawless.
This is your district. 123 is the divided line.
Yeah, so that's the exact part I'm asking to change, but
This is District 2. This is District 1.
and District 2 is abutting, I mean, I realize that's your district, but it impacts,
Central and Clemson city limits are together right here.
Yeah.
So you're wanting all of this black.
no, I'm wanting all of it navy. Because right now you actually have quite a break because you're going from black, you're going from density 5, if you will, to density 3. So I'm asking it to be 4 on both sides. So right now, it would,
I have people that live here that are having a fit because of development that got approved before the moratorium. They don't want that.
I,
They're still gonna have an acre.
That is community.
They don't have an acre.
Is this the person we're talking about?
Yes.
That's right, though. That's community.
no, it's not, look over here, there's a navy, it's not, it's 3. I had to look at it, it jumps from 5 to 3 and it skips over 4.
It jumps from 5 to 3.
Okay.
If the folks in that area sell it if they sell their land, if the people you're talking about and their neighbors sell their land, Clemson's, you're not stopping anything if they sell their land. They don't want it, but if they sell it, Clemson is for sure going to annex it.
Or Central, Central's gonna annex it, right, and Central is, yeah, plenty of apartments, townhomes and stuff, so I would, that's, on both sides of 123, I think it should be a 4, a community center, that's my motion.
So the motion on the table is to make that parcel that was referenced community center from
From natural
natural
heritage,
heritage area.
yes.
Discussion on that.
I make a motion to table that,
Vice Chairman.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the only thing I was gonna say is it's Councilman Wallace and Linville, this is a turf battle and it seems to be, one of the things that we did real well was, I think, begin conversations with the municipalities on how do we have conversations, not where one tells the other what to do with annexation, but where we're kind of on the same page as to who's gonna take, who's gonna be responsible for paying for what? Are you charging impact fees? How is this gonna impact the county? How's it gonna impact the city if you guys annex or if you don't? I'm not a big believer in annexing for revenue, or not annexing so you keep revenue. But it seems more of a compromise going to community, not to gateway. But if you go to community, then it's still 40% open space, right? Am I looking at that right?
30%.
30.
30% open space.
Thank you.
30% open space.
Why are all of this?
I mean, that was just my point. It seems like a bit of a compromise, but what were you going to say?
I proposed, because I don't want to vote on a turf war between the two of you guys, and it doesn't affect the people in my area cogently. But you have Central and you have Clemson, both will annex it. Again, if the people in that area sell their land, they're creating, the opportunity for the problem. So meet with your people and meet with the cities, and y'all come up with an agreement and figure out what the lines need to be between the two of you. I want you guys to be able to make your folks happy. I just asked you to help me with Bird Eye Springs. I don't want to pick between both y'all's opinion, but y'all can go workshop it with all the folks with facts. So I say we table it until the next time we meet for this purpose.
I'll second that.
So on the motion now is to table until they can have discussions and we meet again for this purpose. I have a second on that. Any discussion on that?
Some of the people most affected are people who will be moving into the Grange who don't live there now. It's the only trick about polling them.
We already talked about that. The hell with people that don't live here now.
No, I'm saying the hundreds of houses that are currently under construction. The hundreds of houses that are currently under construction are going to have people living there who won't be able to tell me how they feel about annexation.
Well, you guys are representative leadership, and y'all meet with the other folks. Of course, your back's against the wall with the annexation, right?
Yeah.
So it, just to your benefit to bridge this in some way that is the best possibility of all the evils, right? So that's why I'm saying table it, because some of you guys have to live with it.
How many Clemson employees do you want driving up and down 123? How far do you want them driving?
I'd like to see less Subarus on 123 if I could help it.
Yours is enough.
Yeah.
Other discussion on the motion table? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed?
That motion was to table it, right?
That was.
Yeah.
That was. All right, other discussion. I feel like we have a clear map with 5 clear zones and 5 definitions of 5 clear zones. Any other discussion on the map? All right. If I remember serves correctly, I not just want to revisit this for my own sake. We did make a motion, adopt a motion for 40 feet setbacks, front setbacks, for all residential property in the county. The irony behind that motion is we didn't change it from commercial or industrial, just residential, but it's a blanket statement across the board in the county. Didn't know if we wanted to revisit that or not.
Just based on the face of the planning commission, which is the same face I make when people ask me for an engineering answer, and then they go, now I'm gonna listen to my buddy Teddy that has a Pinto. I'd like to make a motion to eliminate that, because if you're gonna have a half acre, you can put your driveway anywhere you want to, but if you've got an eighth of an acre, we certainly need it, because eighth of an acre means your driveway's gonna be in front of the house. And just based on the fact that they looked like they'd already workshopped that thing a lot until I came up with that craziness. I'd like to make a motion to retract that.
I'll second that motion. Discussion.
I appreciate your.
Admitting I'm wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I'm biased. People just don't notice it because I talk so much.
So the motion was, that was passed was 40 feet for houses only? Is that what it was?
No, it was for everything.
For
It's for everything,
residential?
it's tiny houses, everything. If they all live
Residential.
40 feet.
Right.
Residential is where we.
Are there any lots that are within 1/8 of an acre?
No, I didn't get into all the details like that.
Yes,
Which ones?
eighth of an acre is possible in the
Gateway.
Gateway.
But the setback that we
Sorry,
already
it's not
have.
there.
No, hold on a second. So the gateway has an eighth of an acre for home?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm missing that, because it looks like it just talks about townhomes, duplexes, multifamily, mixed-use buildings.
We still have a half an acre, right?
No,
As it stands,
no, we literally just voted on that.
No, he's right, it doesn't say.
it doesn't say anything about single family.
Well, it says leaving the existing
Just
UDSO.
neighborhoods.
What is the existing UDSO?
So, I mean, detached home.
Sorry.
Please restate the question.
The existing UDSO, not a neighborhood, residential property in the gateway area would be, what is the existing UDSO?
Residential property, not in a subdivision, just residential,
That's right.
half acre lot.
Could be 5,000 square feet if
If
that's
it's a
sewer.
sewer, if it's a 5,000.
Okay, because it said sentence that says leave everything in the existing and proposed DSO.
Yep.
Which would be the 1/8 in that area.
If there's sewer,
If there's.
Yeah, but we haven't made any changes across the entire county for not in a subdivision, right?
what we did with this,
I think the question is, on the gateway and community center, where the first bullet point says allow open space subdivisions, it lists the amount of open space, but it doesn't clarify the lot size. That was in the matrix, but we didn't vote on that. Does the lot size that was voted on with this match what the matrix says? Eighth and acre quarter.
No, it would
No.
match what's proposed in the
In the
UDSO currently.
which is 5,000 feet if you have sewer
For all three centers.
for gateway.
Well, community also says 30% natural heritage for open space.
For open space, so there was no determination of individual lot sizes. It would be what's currently in the UDSO.
Okay, so basically, for individual homes in the gateway area, it can still be as little as 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, but the motion on the table is about setbacks.
No, I'm just trying to clarify, because the 40 feet may make sense if the minimum is half an acre. Now, if the minimum is 1/8 of an acre, or whatever it is in the DSO, then it doesn't make sense. So I'm just trying to find out where it doesn't make sense. So in the natural heritage area, leave the DSO as it is. So those lots can be as little as 5,000 square feet.
In the natural heritage?
Right, because this says leave the DSO as it is. Or, does the motion we made last week where everything's a half acre minimum, does that dominate?
My impression from what we just said about 7.5 minutes ago was that half acre applied to both of those for subdivisions. That was my impression of what we talked about. That's a very specific secondary motion, right?
This language is consistent with that.
We would have had to make an exception to this line because it supersedes the other one. And this stuff's so easy.
So I literally brought that up, I'm gonna say 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes ago now. We need a clock on that wall so I can see what time it is. I look up there constantly and there's no clock. But I literally brought that point up and it was, overwhelmingly whatever felt that the language said in the UDSO, which trumped the half acre vote from last month.
I may have wrote that
From
earlier
last
than that.
week.
Right.
And so I am a little frustrated that we're right back to arguing where we were 10 minutes ago.
I thought we were arguing about that setback.
That is what the motion is on the table, and Councilman Sota has a valid point.
Yeah.
He didn't understand that that was the conversation we had a few moments ago, and so now there's discussion on what lot sizes are and this, that, and the other, and I respect and I understand that. But that is literally right back where we just came from. The motion is to scrap the 40 feet. If you look at the minimum lot widths and setbacks, on the 505 sample for open space subdivisions, minimum setbacks. And this is one area we really messed up on last week, is there was too many blanket and actually went into great detail to clarify that we were making blanket motions for everything, not just certain neighborhoods. I think that's one of the things that's caused even greater confusion. But the open space subdivision, it goes down to your lot size and talks about the setbacks per, the original proposal was for 43,560, you needed 20 feet, 21,780, you needed 50 feet, and for 5,000, you needed 10 feet. Now, I don't know what that measures in F-150s, but I do know that 10 feet is about one F-150-ish, but for a 5,000 foot,
A long bay would tell you that.
right, lot size, just extended or crew cab?
Just the bay.
Just the bay.
So a 2 foot deal,
There you go.
not far.
Good job with the math there. Put it in perspective for me. But that's the question on the table, for me is, all right, we're gonna scrap, or we're gonna go back to what we said, and 408 and 505, and then everything else that's a half acre, to your point, does it matter? Could you go put your driveway anywhere?
Which is certainly the argument we had last week that I overlooked. Fair enough.
So I guess my point is what I'm trying to understand is make sure everybody fully understands that in those three areas, for a single family home in a subdivision, it could be as small as 5,000 square feet below.
Could be.
That I voted no on. For other
That
reasons.
all depends on what area it's in.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
but they're all those three at the bottom are all
Yeah.
5,000 square feet. 9 homes per acre
With sewer.
with sewer, yeah.
Open, and 40% open space, you can put no homes.
And the-
Well, it would be 10, yeah, you're right, but it's still, that last column is 5,000 square feet.
But all the open space requirements that weren't there before.
No, but my point is, it wasn't unanimous that everything was gonna be a minimum half acre, and now all of a sudden it's not. That's all.
Absolutely. There's been a lot that we voted on last week that we have literally completely changed this week,
Okay,
including taking the three fingers out and changing, not adopting this language and adopting that to protect the northern half of the county. Even where it didn't really fully make sense because the fingers actually did, but it made sense in the moment. But the cool thing about this is it's a living document that gets reviewed annually and recommendations brought to council annually.
So the 40 feet doesn't work. It doesn't need to be there as prescribed when you got a half an acre, when you have a huge lot. It doesn't necessarily need to be there for all the ways. Last week we were having such difficulty, it seemed to apply in a number of ways, but it's been made clear to me that some of the things it applies to was, not the best language to have. It'll be a long-term problem for folks in the planning commission. It's gonna get changed. That's why I said this was retracted. He's right, if you've got a 5,000 square foot place, which is maximizing your use of your sewer or whatever, and I misunderstood because I thought it was half acre for all of it, it might still be applicable. And it would be like in the patio houses over on Linhart Grove. I mean, the F-150 is blocking the sidewalk. Clearly that's something we'd like to prevent. So I don't know how to change this. Can we just table the motion or not vote on it and we can come back to it?
Yeah, you gotta undo it if you're gonna undo that. If you table it, you just.
The original.
It's already been voted on, yeah.
It's already on there, so I would like to be able to amend it so that some of the things that don't make sense is taken away from it. Because it was a blanket one.
So would you like to adopt what staff recommended?
So is that this page? That's a change?
505 and 408 would be.
These are reflections of the motion you made last week,
Okay.
not a staff recommendation.
So we would go back to what was originally in red in the book from staff. That I suppose you guys did workshop pretty extensively before you put it together. See that look? That's a yeah, we didn't wing it look.
So your motion is to take the 40 away. Is there anything, would you like to amend that motion to make it clear what you want to do when you take the 40 away?
To take the 40 away from everything except for the residential homes with less than a half acre lot size.
So if they have less than a half acre lot size, then they have to have a 40-foot.
Yeah, said that.
Okay.
So that's,
Because if it's 5,000 square feet, most likely the driveway's going to lead right up to the garage. It's not going to go beside it like you could see, or a horseshoe. And if it's going right up to the garage, we've got to set it back enough so that because everybody has two cars and nobody uses garages for garages, so that people can park in front of their house. There may be a more sophisticated way to do that, but
so this is when we get devils in the details. Okay. What if the driveway is X number of square feet, and I'm not really good at math this hour of the day, and you can get 3 cars side by side, do I still need the 40-foot setback?
What if it's a townhome?
Here's the people that were advocating for this, right, very, very specifically, were looking at that particular application. What the hell? What do you think? Is that not what you're looking for?
We don't
spend
want
30
cars
minutes
to be
talking
all
about
over the road. I mean, people order stuff from Amazon every day, and there's giant trucks that have to get through neighborhoods. So we would like for cars to be off the road, which is why we push it. Yeah, so, an F-150 is about 17 feet long. And so even if you park one almost nose to tail, you need 40 feet, just take 2.
And to be clear, he asked for 60 feet.
Yeah.
Right?
But just because I have a long driveway doesn't mean I have to park in it. I can still park on the road.
I agree.
Yeah, but parking in the road's a problem for school buses and ambulances and fire trucks.
The train wreck, if you go to Linhart Grove and you see the train wreck that's over there, it's a terrible example that we need to use for a good example.
So let me just pause there for a moment. What is in the county ordinance and the state law currently in the sheriff's department or highway patrol to enforce impeding the roadway?
Well, there is something about impeding a roadway. Yes, there is. You can't block a road in a public street, but we don't have an enforcement mechanism in the county ordinances.
Nor do we currently approve parking in single-family residential.
Now,
We approve a house setback, but not the parking area.
So I do understand the thought and the idea is I can't enforce it because state law, it's up to the sheriff's department and it's up to highway patrol to enforce or municipality to enforce. I understand that thought process. I do have a little bit of heartburn over the 40 feet. I understand 17 feet for an F-150, if you have 2 of them, nose to tail, it's what you're going to park on your grass,
It gives you room to not be over the sidewalk. That's where the 40 feet really, the military term is terrible. If you get them really close together, you shouldn't block your sidewalk. I think is kind of the genesis. Like I said, they wanted 60, right? But at a half acres and above, then there's plenty of room to park. Should be.
Well, I'm just going to make the argument then, if there should be, you shouldn't park in the road. So
I agree.
I don't know that I would support the motion just for 5,000 feet lots. I think that it needs to stick across the board because if I want to build within, if I want the original 20 feet on my half acre, shouldn't be any different than, you should build your driveway, whatever. You hear my argument there?
But we also applied it to townhomes and we applied it to other.
Well, a townhome's going to sit on smaller than, or a 5,000 foot lot.
I think the argument was though that was the townhomes would most likely park in the back, or you might with townhomes have a different style of parking. Is that not what the argument was?
That was what the argument was.
But we voted to do the 40. The planning commission's going to review this every year.
Right.
So.
This is why I was leaning more towards just adopting what was in the original document.
The one we did last week or the original document?
Well, not the one that we changed it to 40 feet.
Fair enough.
I can see both sides of this argument, I really can. But I think it's just something that we could literally sit here and argue about all night.
I agree. Fair enough. So I made a motion to go back to eliminate it, we'll go back to what the staff said. Right? And then if we have an issue, we have an outlet for being able to address it. Most of the places, the lot sizes are going to be large enough that you can be able to have parking.
Does that apply, there's a section 408 here and a section 505. You're removing 40 feet from both sections?
The red 40s on 408.
On 408, you're not talking about 505 at this point?
Oh, you see that page.
It's open space.
Where it went from 10 feet to 40 feet.
Same situation.
Yeah, it's all the same.
So it's all, I'm just saying, you want to go ahead and collectively?
I thought I had done that, but yeah, collectively would be the eliminating that.
I'll tell you, and that's your motion, and I'll second that because I second the original. I would actually make an amendment as a compromise because the 5,000 feet is causing some anxiety. Those lot sizes, I would say 20 feet, because that's what it's for a larger lot. And that gets you higher than the 10-foot minimum that an F-150 won't fit in.
I'll second that.
I don't have any issues with that. I just, this particular motion was the only thing I heard anything about. I heard they did send me a note saying that they could do it 40. But all of the exceptions to the rule was what folks called me about.
I understand that. So the amendment on the table is for the, instead of 2015-10, it'd be 2020-20.
And right now, it's 40, 2020, is that it? Is that what we approved last time?
Right now, it's 40, 40, 40.
Okay,
Original was 20.
after last week, it's 40, 40, 40. The motion was for 2015-40, and the amendment, should have just done a substitute motion. The amendment is 2020-20.
Wait, are you still just on 404, 408?
He's on
405, 505, but I'm just blanking it for 408 as well.
I thought you were only changing the 5,000 square foot one to 20 feet.
No, I was just making all three of them 20 feet, just to be consistent.
I see, okay.
The largest was 20 feet, so I was going with 20 feet.
Okay.
I'm personally okay with leaving it at 40.
Me too.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Change them all to 20?
Do you guys mind giving a good reason for it? Because I this is.
I think it would take care of itself. It's like you were saying, on a half-acre lot, you're not gonna have a problem with it.
Right.
I think on a 5,000 square foot lot, I can see where there could be some issues there, depending on how the structure is built.
And
On a
just to be clear,
5,000 square foot lot, I might would go 30, 20, but on half and whole acre plus, I would stick with 40.
and it is, for my purposes, 5,000 to 8,000 square foot lots are the places where you have the biggest risk for 40. So that, instead of a substitute motion, I can just amend my original motion, right? So amend my original motion, it's 20 for everything except for 5,000 to 8,000 square foot lots, and that would be 40. And then everything bigger than that, it kind of fixes itself, right?
I would hope so.
So that accommodates what you're trying to do. It changes it for all of it. It reverses the issue and gets it closer to what the staff asked for. Is that fair?
Could you go through each column and tell me what it is that what number you're putting in, please?
So it'll be
408?
20. Wait, 408. On 408, it'd be all 20 on 408. On 505, it would be 20, 20, and then 40.
So
2020 and then 40?
I'll second your amended motion. I do want to point out your minimum lot width for a 5,000 foot lot is 20 feet. So if the front of my lot,
It's 20 feet long, then how do I have a 40-foot driveway?
I have not had to live with it, right? These folks have had to live with it, and they were pretty loudly advocating for it as a group.
okay,
So,
okay,
I don't,
it's a living document.
right,
Okay.
I mean,
Other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed?
I think we've talked so much about it, I'm confused now.
Other discussions that we need to pick up tonight?
I have a couple questions about the traffic policy. Can we go back to that?
Yeah, where is that located, just so we're all on the same page?
You know, it's in this book somewhere.
Towards the end of the massive binder.
All right, so made it through tonight's packet.
So we're kind of, well, you guys can. What kind of threw me about that was that it talks about you have different up to six different studies that are required based on the trips per day. Now trips per day mean nothing. So it's like how big a subdivision means something. So the average home makes about 9 trips per day. So I just converted that column. So instead of 0 to 500 trips, it's 0 to 55 homes. So 0 to 55 home subdivisions, you don't have to do any study. And then 55 to 110 homes, you do 2 of those studies.
What page are we talking about?
You know, it's Henry, it's, I think it's in the back of this new stuff we got a while ago. When they sent us the whole DSO.
amendments,
Yeah, I've got it towards the back, right here.
the traffic study.
Yeah, right here.
It's in the very back, it's the red line of the, and it doesn't have a page number. It says updated August 30.
There's gotta be a section number or something.
No, after a sec,
It's not, there's a tab, and if you have
If you have the back.
you have the binder, which I don't.
I don't know.
What's the tab, 2B?
So all I was trying to do is just I took that those tables and I converted them to the number of houses, a subdivision is. And that's, so it appears to me that from 0 to 55 houses, there's actually no studies required. Is that is that right?
So just for point of clarification, Councilman Sato, what quantity did you use to convert from?
I used 9. I went, I looked, I think it's called the universal transportation, whatever. How many houses, how many trips a day each house does. Like different people, like seniors maybe do 6 a day, students maybe do 8, adults working do 7, the average is 9. So that's how I got to 55. Now, you guys would know that.
Well, we don't actually know that. We don't have the
Okay,
folks that did that part of the calculation
So,
for us.
so my point is, this table doesn't really mean anything if unless you know what that first column means. To me, 0 to 500 trips meant nothing. I wanted to know how big a subdivision had to be before it started kicking in all these requirements. And I got it from 0 to 55 for the first row, then 55 to 110 for the second. That's how it works.
We can't validate that math. It may be the case.
Okay, so that's the first point. So do that.
We would.
That'd be nice to get this table out. The other thing I was worried about was the county reserves the right to waive or require traffic studies based on unique factors. Waive means just totally ignore it. Say to the developer, you don't need to do any traffic studies. And that's up to the county. Do you read that like I do? You do.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a purpose behind that from the planning staff.
What is the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just always a case where it makes more sense. That would be waived by the planning commission, not by staff.
Trad said, did he not say that was when maybe they had done one before, there was already one in
If
existence?
there's already one existing, yeah.
That is correct. We did discuss that last month, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Oh, you said they had to do one already because it implicated the SCPLT entrance.
Yeah, but the language
We
is
could waive
real.
it. It's not making do
If there's already one, yeah.
You make that language more specific.
What it says, the wording exactly is what it says.
I got this one.
All right, guys.
Okay, I'll just read it.
Councilman Sato, if you'll pause just a second. Everybody wants to try to get on the same page.
The August one is the most recent one you did.
I think he's in the
No, you're fine.
I'm on this.
language.
Right here.
We good?
2 pages after.
I have a book that starts at Article 3. Then I have this thing.
That thing.
No, do you want this?
Is there a copy?
Where was it that? You actually want this thing. But yeah.
Okay, so you guys ready?
It's after section 1301, 1405, and then it goes into all this little stuff.
If you have it online, it's from August 31st.
All right, Councilman Sato.
Okay, it says the county reserves, not the planning commission, it says the county, which I'm assuming is the county administration. County reserves the right to waive or require traffic studies based on unique factors specific to a particular project or location. So that's just pretty much carte blanche. They want to just waive that requirement, the county administration has the right to do that. That's the way I interpret that.
We're not seeking that power, if you would clarify that language.
I'll make a motion that we clarify the language that the county has the right to waive if the studies have been completed prior to, I don't like that language, but
I would just strike it out, because they don't have the right to waive.
No, so, if you'd like to make a motion, go ahead.
Yeah, just strike that line out, and just, you know, you can,
So,
there is, if you look at.
so is that a motion?
Yeah.
I have a motion to strike that language, or the language waive out.
Yeah.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Strike that whole sentence out.
Strike that whole sentence out. I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion?
Read the sentence.
Okay, it says the county reserves the right to waive or require traffic studies based on unique factors specific to a particular project or location. My motion is to strike that out.
Can you second that? Do I have a second on that?
We're striking the whole sentence or just taking away?
Yeah.
I'll second it for the sake of discussion. Councilman Long.
Just strike the whole thing out.
If we remove waive or and just have required, then it would just, everybody would be required. Which is what we're trying to do, right?
That is correct. So my thought behind that is if you just remove the word waive or the two words waive or, this is where I was going, then when Councilman Sato was making the point to a subdivision with 55 homes using his matrix, wouldn't require a traffic study, the county could actually say you need a traffic study. It would allow for that leeway from the county or the planning commission to do that. So I would like to make a substantive motion that we just strike waive or, so that the county does have the authority to require a traffic study where it's not indicated in the UDS.
Second.
Discussion on that.
I haven't read every word of this. Doesn't this require a traffic study somewhere else in the word? It doesn't, I mean, I can read the introduction, doesn't it say it's required?
That's what the
It's
the
required
policy
based on
is.
the
Yeah,
table, yeah.
based on the table.
Well, according to what we read there, that you changed the calculation to 0 to 500, it's not listed as required.
It says, the purpose of Pickens County traffic study policy is to standardize the requirements for various development-related traffic studies in Pickens County. So there is a requirement embedded in there, so I think you take that whole sentence out. You're still required to do this, right?
Then under a certain, to your previous point, under a certain
Amount
area
you're
of
not.
houses,
Well,
then
that's
there wouldn't be required. But we could look at it and say, you know what, I'm gonna use your math. There's only 52 houses on this new development on Sheriff Mill Road or on Midway. And so it's not gonna trigger our traffic policy, but the people are telling us again and again that there's too much traffic. So if you take the whole language, the whole sentence out, we wouldn't be able to, we, meaning the planning commission in these instances, be able to say, no, you need a traffic study.
Okay, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think a point of clarification, when it says the county, it's referring to the county council, and all of our boards and commissions and whatnot?
It's gonna be, if it says this is.
The planning commission in that instance.
Yeah, but if it says in a different sentence, what's not planning commission, it means the people that represent the county for that particular.
That are empowered in that
That's right.
specific area.
Right, so it's not us and them.
So the county doesn't mean the county administration?
I'm telling you, we are not seeking that power, so that doesn't
So
mean.
why don't we just clarify it to the planning commission?
Well, for instance, if it's a land use that doesn't go in front of the planning commission and stays with planning, you would want planning to have that authority. So I think it's better to make it broader. I mean, it's obviously your choice. But if you made it broader, you just put the county, and that includes.
So then it could be the administration or any arm of the county?
Whoever's tasked with doing that job. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Any other discussion? Any unintended consequences? I need another cookie. Any unintended consequences from removing waive or?
Might require someone to do too.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be, that's really it. We might end up in a situation where we say, hey, sorry guys, you gotta do it.
Okay. Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you, Councilman Sato.
Thank you. So you're gonna get back to us on this table with these?
Yes, yes, we got that now.
Councilman Seda, my understanding was trips per day generated as a engineering term, like people who study traffic, that's a known quantity.
We don't have that
And I don't know what it
You
is,
can
but I
just
thought that was
Google
a
it.
standard number.
It is. I think it's 9.44, the last time I looked.
It has other factors, I believe, also as to what type of community it is, whether it's an apartment or a subdivision or a retirement facility where they calculate what those are. There's a handbook that's standardized.
Councilman Wallace. Are the radius of required studies large enough at 2 miles being the furthest out on a greater than 1,250 trip development? Would it need to be the next major intersection?
It's a valid question. I can tell you that staff thought the 2 miles was sufficient, but that's just their recommendation.
When we were discussing it, we were talking about to the nearest commuter corridor. It would be like a main road, like a Saluda Dam road, right? So that may not be 2 miles, and if it's 2.1, all of a sudden we've got to. So to me, if you're looking at the Linhart Grove, you're going to go one direction down to Olive Street, and you go the other direction, all the way down Linhart Road to Saluda-ish, right, or to 183. That would be for me the nearest commuter corridors. So what you're talking about there is like to a real terminus point, right? Where you're going to give them a road that's just
a radius.
That's right.
Where it's the impacts was injured.
Right. And where's the radius? Is the radius from where you turn out of the neighborhood, or is it from the closest proximity of that particular?
The entrance is what I was. We have a way that we characterize roads, 54321, that we use in the mapping department, and that might be useful. I'm going to try to get that information right now.
Is there, one of you guys had a conversation with folks that were talking about developers across the state, or maybe further, it being normalized to have to do road improvements all the way out. I'm not sure who it was that was telling me about that, right? So we're not really asking people to do anything that's not normal. They just get away with not having to do it. Fair enough. I would like to make it very specific to where you're going to pull onto a road that can't handle the traffic, without a better way to describe it.
We'll have to define that specifically.
Yes, ma'am.
I think this is appropriate to do at this point. When you go back to our committee, the whole packet from last week, there's a section called ordinance language still to be discussed. It starts with Article 3, standards of certain uses. Staff has gone through and page 10 through 95 on line 1. Staff has gone through and changed words, commas, sentences to respond to everything we've been talking about. And I would like to make a motion to pass the proposed language changes reflected in Article 3, standards for certain uses.
Did we not do that already?
So those specifically were missing the definition of a tiny home, so that was added into those. Otherwise, they reflect everything.
Okay, so I have a motion on the table. I'll second the motion. Discussion.
And this is number what?
It's called Article 3, standards for certain uses. It's from last week's packet.
Yeah, I'm
It's
with
under
you.
the giant title, ordinance language still to be discussed.
Well, I mean,
And your motion was?
To pass the language proposed by staff.
Seconded that motion.
I don't know who you have on staff for this. The one thing I would add is one more review by a proofreader. As a fellow proofreader, there was still, with track changes and stuff, there was still some weird words. I know.
We know the formatting's off until we accept change, so we'll do a full.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, because I know that that's one of our things we did.
I have some questions about what's in there, Mr. Chair.
Councilman second.
The RV parks, what's the materials that's to be used on the interior roads?
I'm not clear on
What's
that.
that?
Can you restate the question?
Section 302.
302.
Restate that question.
What is the materials that's to be used on the interior roads?
You mean whether it's gravel or it's farm gravel or it's asphalt?
Yeah.
Or is that characterized?
I don't think so.
Is that something that we specify everywhere else?
Mobile home parks, we do, yeah.
I need to, point of order, the blue versus red in this document.
Those are two different staff members changes, but they're all.
This all changes, okay.
So, 302B5, it says patch, gravel, paving, or other suitable material large enough for the recreational vehicle and one additional car or truck. So what was the question?
That's the pad. That's the pad that the DRB sits on.
Right. So
Now, you know, when it's spread out 5 to 10 acres, or whatever it is, there's gonna be roads inside there. And what are those roads made out of?
Is it specified in
We've
there?
never specified
I
that
don't think it is.
prior
just be
or
dirt
in
roads?
proposed.
Or an RV park? Yeah, I think it could be.
I think so, that's my issue. They'll end up like those mobile home parks. That's why.
What, how do you think that language should be?
Me? I think it should be like the mobile home park. It should be asphalt.
You get a vote, I don't. How, is that
I would
motion?
say asphalt. But I'm just saying, I'm just pointing it out because it's.
Right.
It wasn't mentioned in there and I was just, what are they gonna require?
That's
When
up to us.
the planning commission says, you know, what is it, what are they gonna require? It seems like they might have some leeway.
It's an RV park, right? I mean, it's where people take RVs. And everyone that I've been in, I think I've been in some highfalutin ones, whatever, right? But we had two brown tanks. I can't think of one that had, other than one owned by the government, that had a paved road. And some of that's because people do stupid stuff with RVs and they'll gouge the road by leaving their jacks down. They'll, do all kinds of crazy stuff. The turning and twisting that people invariably do. The only place I can think of is like the big campgrounds down at like Ocean Lakes, where they have gravel and maybe concrete pads, but not necessarily. They have paved roads to commute through, but not necessarily, the pull-throughs. But most of the time they're gravel.
Manufactured home park has to be asphalt or concrete according to what we got now.
Yeah, but an RV park's not a manufactured home park.
Compared the two.
Some RV parks on campgrounds.
Right.
So it would be inappropriate to have asphalt. Not environmentally friendly.
We have paved areas leading into a Mile Creek, right, and then you have gravel right there at the actual pullouts.
A couple of concrete pads, but mostly gravel.
Okay.
And some of your roadways are still gravel at Mile Creek, right? Like Turkey Loop and.
So maybe you might wanna just require gravel.
Because
It's a dirt.
It's a for-profit enterprise, right? And if you got dirt, you're not gonna have a whole lot of people coming in there when it's wet or leaving when it's wet. Do we want to, what's the kosher reason why we would dictate how they do the road? Does it have to be, is there a standard for?
They gotta get an EMS vehicle in there.
I've seen grass ones.
Right, yeah. Oh, those are usually like for airstreams. Those are the fluid ones.
Councilman said if you'd like to make a motion.
I don't really know, I mean, they would know, you have to get in there, EMS vehicles, whatever. If they're 5 acres minimum or as high as 10 acres.
There's an RV park at
Just
Jocassee.
ask your people what they think, if they think dirt roads are fine, then that's fine.
There's an RV park on the right-hand side as you go into Jocassee. I mean, it's straight off back into the back of it, and it's really kind of tight turns, and people have to be able to pull, 30-foot trailers in there, and it's all gravel.
It's just something to think about, that's all.
Thank you.
Other discussion over the language.
The issue on the roads, like I said, we characterize for mapping purposes, this is just something we've used through the years with our GIS department, is 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. A 5 is basically glorified driveway. Okay, that's a very small road with a couple houses on it. A 1 is 123, and the variety goes in between that. So if you made a traffic study policy that said you had to get to the 1s, that would probably be excessive. But what I hear you saying is you like some kind of approach that said, okay, you need to get to the nearest 2 or 3. You need to get to the nearest bigger. I don't want to get into the definition of that because I'm getting this from our GIS guy who's sitting at home right now. So I don't want to get too granular with that information, but we will pass that back to you in the coming days.
So if I get the motion at hand, the language as, I've got the actual.
Was there a motion?
Yes. You had the motion, right?
Oh, my
To
motion,
adopt
I
it.
thought.
Any other discussion on the motion on the table? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? What else do we have on our list, Ms. Lingle?
I don't believe we need to pass anything related to the glossaries. That goes through our packet from last week.
Other general discussion. Anything we may have missed from the planning department?
The only thing we had once discussed a acreage limit on RV parks in certain areas, if y'all wanted to revisit that.
That was passed. In second reading, wasn't it?
I thought the acreage
Well,
minimum.
the areas had not been defined at that point, so.
Was there a motion in the heritage area, three heritage areas to maximize it to 10?
I thought we minimized the size.
It was both. It was a minimum, this is what I remember, a minimum of 5 countywide. And then in the heritage area, I thought there was a vote to maximize it to 10. I thought that'd be me.
Oh, we didn't cap it because we didn't want to, have some craziness happen until we had a chance to really deep dive.
There must be a minimum of 5 acres. Previously it was 2. That's what we voted on.
I do remember the maximum conversation, and Megan, I'm gonna have to allow you to go back and look. And the reason why is I had the argument that, how many acres is Mile Creek?
Oh, we just talked about this.
You didn't know the answer that night
did
either.
not.
I did, but then my later.
My point was, is I am hard pressed to say, we're gonna do what we want to in this area, but you can't. That was my heartburn that night, but I do feel like it passed.
And I think it's when we had the 5 groups, there were 3 heritage areas, it was 10. I voted for it.
My notes that it was a minimum of 5 acres. It started a minimum of 2, and that there was a request that we expand this to allow them to be larger in certain regions.
Yeah, I don't know that we,
It's not in the.
Megan, did you do minutes for that meeting yet?
Yes, October.
October 16th.
Yes. RV park track. Made a motion, or Councilwoman Claiborne Linville made a motion that the minimum acreage of an RV park or campground be changed from a minimum of 2 acres to a minimum of 5 acres. Councilman Henry made an amended motion stating, subject to the approval of the zone areas, he would like to limit RV parks to a minimum of 5 acres in all the zones and a maximum of 10 acres in the 3 heritage zones, pending approval of the map.
we approved the map tonight, which means the 10 acres in the heritage zone lives based on that motion. Is that the way I understand that, Mr. Attorney?
I think so.
Councilman Sato, does that answer the question?
That's right, that's what I remember.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
That means they can be in the more dense zones, you can have a larger RV park. Is that
What?
Yeah. It only,
smaller in the more rural places, and they can be larger in the denser places? That feels
Oh, we canned the RV
opposite.
park earlier. But there was a restriction on that earlier.
minimum of 5 acres everywhere, right?
Minimum of
Megan?
5 acres. You have to have
And maximum of 10 in the
3 heritage zones,
3 heritage zones.
approval of the map.
We just did this.
Does it seem weird that feels opposite? I mean, I guess capitalism will take care of that, like if someone can buy a whole bunch of land right next to a city, but I don't know.
Oh, I got you, because the restrictions in here is do not allow RVs as dwelling units, so it allows a place where it allows RV parks, you're right. So, certainly at the next meeting, we could have a very cogent discussion about RVs, right?
Other discussion? Anything else from the planning department that we may be missing? Looking at the list of things, I think we've covered everything that I had on my list.
I have a question.
Okay.
Motorized vehicle tracks, commercial, we just approved this, I have a question about what's a track? Is a track like a racetrack, a loop? And so commercial doesn't include like ag purposes or anything like that. This is just basically dirt racetracks.
That's right.
Commercial use.
When you say commercial use, what does that mean?
Means your sell tickets or your or memberships or something like that.
It's for profit.
All right. So
some race promoters would argue that all racing is not for profit.
So dirt track would be anything, a trail or are we talking about just racing?
That's been a question in the past. It's been a question in the past with non-motorized. So if you got a dirt bike trail through the woods, and you're selling tickets.
Yeah, it's not defined, but I would say motorized vehicle tracks, either needs to be defined, because I know you can have, in common language, I think that would include, ATVs, 4x4s, motorcycles, dirt bikes, motorized vehicles. So you have a course, that you're selling tickets that you can go ride on your course, that would be what that would be. Well, it doesn't have to be a race, it could be a course. A business, if you're riding out on your farm, that's not a commercial use.
So the complaint that I got was, ambulatory use, properties for, ag tourism purposes. So you wanna have a Rudy Mankey experience and go out and look at the little nubs on the limbs and things, right? A lot of folks are not gonna hike 3 miles back into the woods to go see 2 flowers and a thistle. So you're telling me that I can't charge $30 to have Rudy's already passed, right? But to have a Rudy-like individual give a tour and I drive you out there using a tractor and a trailer. Or in this case, it also says, this basically also means that I can't do a haunted hayride at Halloween. Unless it is horrible if you own a place like I have, which is super spooky.
Or a hayride.
Right.
I think that's a very, very, very broad description.
Right, so
motorized vehicle tracks for commercial uses.
And then the purpose of this originally was clearly the Blackstones wanted to keep any other racetracks from popping up, and they didn't want a dirt track in their neighborhood because they wanted to get all the Schlitz malt liquor sales or PBR sales back then. So it's so broad. There's so many exceptions, but it also excludes so many things people want to do from a tourism perspective.
So your suggestion is define motorized vehicle tracks?
I don't think folks want dirt track racing, right? I don't think they want that loud sort of nastiness, whatever, right? But there's so many other things. I mean, the horse pasture, there's so much use up in the horse pasture area for ATV use, but there's so many people in our community own these $30,000 vehicles and they got to drive to, Western North Carolina just to go check out the view. So the workarounds are going to start being things where they're trying to do it as ag tourism, and it'll be very well protected, and you can do it anywhere. So we should be more specific in allowing some things because people are going to start doing it. They want to start doing it. And I really like, when you look at a couple of side-by-sides to go up to the top of the hill to have a picnic or whatever, it's not really it's not racing. But this is all commercial uses.
Well, I think of things like the hay rides we took the kids on, and this right off the road, and you got all this stuff set up, and you're riding the tractor around through the corn maze and all that stuff. That's right in line with what this kind of stuff we want.
Prohibited. And then, have you ever been to the Hatfield McCoy's Trail in West Virginia? It's kind of a area, right? And you rent ATVs and you ride off into the woods, and it's it's view. It's not like 7 rednecks and a Chevy pickup truck. It's nice. I'm saying that not a John Jeep.
Are you proposing a change today?
I think that if we want to prevent like dirt track races, we should be in when you say the word tracks, it should be racetracks. I'd like to add the word racetracks. Because there's, I think it's Blackstone, they had a point. Blackwell, there was, even when they did this, I have a map from the 50s posted on the wall of the house. There was no place in this county that you could get a mile without a house. So when it says residential, you pretty much knocked out our entire county from being competition. So is there not some, if we say
So
racetrack?
motion to change the language that to say motorized racetracks.
Motorized vehicle racetracks, because see, then you could also race bicycles or pogos or whatever you want to.
So that's my motion. Is that a motion? That's my motion on the table. Do I have a second?
So the word race.
It's the motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Which section is that?
303A.
Mr. Chairman, I would offer to provide council with a definition of, in line with what Dr. Wilson is saying. I think you don't want to have hayride races, right? Or do you?
Yeah,
I think we could come up with some language that would meet what it is that you're wanting, that would be more specific, and because you want to limit it to racetracks. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. But
I'd like to prohibit racetracks, yeah.
Okay, I think we can have some language in there that would prohibit that type of activity that would be very clear. I think it would be very clear on that without changing the substance of what it is you want. I think if you just add the word race, you might have unintended consequences.
Amend my motion to add the word race and give clarification on what the definition of racetracks are.
Just have to come with the recommendation.
Second that amendment.
Yeah, I do. I'll second that.
Councilman second.
So that's just a recommendation. You're asking them for a recommendation on it.
But no, I want to go ahead and I'm making a motion to change it based on the definition.
Oh, okay. Tell me
They
one more
have
time.
defined it.
Just to be specific.
He specifically wants to stop the language is in place that prohibits a guy from doing a hayride. So the intent of the intention of creating this was saying, we don't want these guys out here racing motorcycles or creating a commercial racetrack in the backyard with ATVs and stuff like that next to the residential area. So he's going to give the definition of what a racetrack is, so that it still allows the agritourism business things that are available, or that people are already doing. I mean, I guess they're breaking the law.
No, they're breaking the law, but if they're not doing it as I think it says dirt tracks, and dirt tracks could be a cow trail, right? And if you got 7 people coming out there and renting Airbnb, one of my guys calls it Airbnb. I apologize if I ever say that, y'all. But if you rent an Airbnb, then that's commercial use, and you're out there riding an ATV that comes with the Airbnb, or a golf cart. Golf cart's gonna move. So to me, this thing allows somebody to come in and say you're doing something illegal when there's about 95 things it applies to. For me, it's the intent. The intent was not have a dirt racetrack out there. So I like the idea of him saying, racetrack, blah, 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 and then you can come back in and define exactly what a dirt racetrack is. Hatfields and McCoys.
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Any other discussion?
Chairman?
Ms. Wendell?
Now that we have defined a map, and talked about what subdivisions can go in there as well as residential, is there a staff recommendation, or is this the time to also consider any limitations we want to put in commercial, industrial, or levels of industrial within these zones? For example, might we not want industrial or heavy industry in the Gateway Corridor because we're right next to a city and we're interested in more housing? Might we want there to be mixed use commercial available in some areas, not other? I'm not sure exactly what the appetite of council is, but I feel like that's one part of development that we have skipped thus far, is that some people really care if the property next to them can have light industrial put it in. Right now, the entire county's not zoned, so that can happen at any point.
With the exception of Highway 11.
With the exception of Highway 11. So, my question is first to staff. Has there been any discussion in the millions of things we've given you to do and the times you've had to change it, of a version of that kind of zoning that goes with zoned map like we have?
We have discussed it specifically for the Gateway corridor, what could and could not be allowed, but we have not developed full language.
Okay.
Unsure
The Gateway
what
corridor is super tiny.
It's not
on
a
this
corridor
map.
anymore.
It's not a corridor.
So-
Exactly. We got rid of the corridor. So now the black area Gateway corridor is so tiny that I personally would like to see those recommendations apply to community as well. And maybe there's a point in Appalachian Heritage, maybe they don't want some of this as well, I'm not sure. But I would like the next phase of, and I'm not sure if this is pre-January or not, but I would like personally the next phase to include some recommendations on what's allowable in different zones.
So Ms. Lundville, just to share my thoughts as well, is I really wanted to get through what we've gotten through thus far.
Yeah.
Get it passed, get it on the books and rolling, and then readdress. Because to the motorsports argument we just had, or discussion we just had, I don't know that our off-road vehicle park in the Gateway would make the most sense. I don't know that it wouldn't, but I don't know that it would. But it might make sense in the next zone out or next area out. Just like we did with Highway 11, you can't do heavy industrial up there. There's areas that it's light industrial with some commercial would make sense, but heavy industrial would not make sense. But if you look at a lot of the irony behind all of it, this is where I'm torn, and it's also the reason why I like to get through this document and then pick up those things. Every one of our municipalities, I don't know about Clemson per se, but they were built around mills, or mills were built in them, I guess you could say. And when I think about, we talk about apartments and this, that, and the other, and attainable housing, and you think about the old mill hills and the number of rental properties in those old mill hills, they're all there because there were mills. We've learned that was heavy industrial with a huge environmental impact in some areas of our county. One at the bottom of the hill, this council has discussed and debated in the past about. So I do think it is worth the conversation, worth talking, and I think it's the next steps. I really do. I don't know that, personally, I feel like the timing, I feel like getting this out, voted on, passed, and then that is the next step, is my personal feelings.
Mr. Chairman, two other points there. One is that the industrial commercial aspect of this is not subject to the moratorium, so it doesn't have the time constraint.
That was my last piece.
No, was it?
You're doing a good job.
And the other one is, I almost feel like I want to dare you. You hadn't thought of this. We would like to workshop that with the planning commission some before we came to specific recommendations.
Okay, I'm fine waiting. I just wanted to make sure it's part of the conversation because it feels like a big missing piece if we don't do that as well. If we've now zoned the county, which we just did.
No, we did not. We aerated the county.
We're actually not doing anything until the first.
If we now moved forward on zoning the county, but not concluded yet, then that to me is what truly protects a lot of people and what they want out of their property.
Vice Chairman.
So I want to go back to the original intent of when we started, and this isn't in the beginning of this year, this goes all the way back to August of the year before when we first started talking about it, to get to first reading in February, to get to the second reading a month or so ago, to get to where we are today. The intent was to get to stop or to plan for the growth of the development of these houses, the tract homes, where they're just coming and clear cutting and just putting in a gazillion homes. That was our intent. Well, just as our intent with Highway 11 was to protect and preserve what was happening there. So I'm echoing what you're saying in that, yes, we do need to do this, but we haven't had those conversations with the community. We haven't heard from the planning commission or from staff on their suggestions. What we did by the zoning or the areas or whatever you want to call it has actually put in place significant restrictions and protections, even though the half acre isn't exactly where I was hoping it would be, but because those areas have changed, it's protected it's given those restrictions in the areas that I think of where people are wanting it the most. So our next step to me is a motion to move this, what we have done thus far, forward to third reading and to pass that.
Second that.
So the Mill Hills are certainly one of the first, truly walkable communities, right? Work, shop, everything in there. The industrial thing that you're talking about, we spent a great deal of time discussing industrial. We did the Highway 11 overlay. And when you read that in section 3 there, it says in giant, relative scale giant, industrial use prohibited. And, we explicitly solicited input across that. We talked to so many people. It's incredible. And then to see recently, folks claiming that we okayed and approved industrial up there where there were no provisions before. And we specifically, it says no, it's industrial use prohibited. To see it claimed that we approved it was crazy. The thing for me, I think that is important is that what you're asking for is certainly relevant. But let's do it so that we can get out there and be in front of the community so that folks can't twist the actual truth and claim that we approved it because we put language in there that was never there before. Right? And I'm right in this, right? It says industrial use prohibited, big bold letters. So for what you're hoping to accomplish, if we slide that in while folks are making claims that even on Highway 11 we didn't protect anybody, I think it'd be a much better move for us as a community communicators to be able to do this. Specifically, we're going to look at the whole county the same way we did on Highway 11. Because, it's a meaningful exercise.
Vice Chairman.
So I do want to say this. Economic development is incredibly important to this county. We just had the announcement of FN America. But that takes a long time to get those kind of companies there. Yes, so this is super important that we talk about the manufacturing, the commercial aspects of it, but it is a completely different discussion.
And to be clear, before you can raise your hand and say, I can't raise my hand high enough, you got to go through the planning process, then you have to vote successively to build the area, to market the area, to fund the changes to the area, to get an FN to show up, right? So I think that's a meaningful discussion to have in front of the community because it's been so easy for folks to skip out on the hard part and then take credit for the end part, right? So let's be as explicit about that as we can so that we can push back a little bit on the false narratives.
Before moving to third reading, we might need to define what the at-risk areas are.
Yeah, well, and that I'm moving everything that we have out so far into third reading. They can come back and we do need to do that. That would be a part of
some open-ended things.
There's a couple open-ended things that we need to close up as a part of the third reading that could be they could be voted out or voted on, but I'm saying what we have now, let's send it as it is. Whatever else the changes, the language for the racetrack, all those things still have to be voted in as a part of that. But rather than just keep kicking the can down the road, we're at a point now where.
But by moving it to third reading, would that not mean we would be in regular meeting having to do all that?
We would be in regular meeting having to add those extra little parts, yeah.
So I think that what he's saying is you'd like to have another cow where all of that's kind of cleaned together.
I would feel more comfortable knowing what we're fixing to go into third reading with than us sitting there for 2 hours hashing things out in that setting.
I think we
can't really see each other.
Yeah.
We made some changes to the map, which I have scribbled here and circled and then put a question mark next to one. I think the public deserves to see a full map before we vote on it the third time. So I think we need the updated map, and it needs to be made public more than one day before our meeting, because that's the biggest thing we did in the stuff that y'all are hearing the most about. I believe we need a meeting, or at least, if we can't have a meeting, then it at least needs to have a clean map with these changes go out to the public well before it goes.
So I agree. My other thing is, I'm not afraid of the moratorium expiring because, I guess there are a couple of some developers that would be coming and go, oh, I'm under the wire. But I also know that I just think we need to move it forward, get the information out to the public tomorrow. Can you do it tomorrow? Okay, Allison's going
I'm
nuts.
meeting with GIS at 9 a.m. tomorrow,
Okay.
but we have not defined the.
And to all of us,
the other
and,
areas.
but I mean, I'm good with having, if y'all wanna have another meeting, I'll have another meeting.
Here's my issue with not having it buttoned up beforehand, right? It would be great if we could see it, see what, give you guys a chance to come together, right?
Oh, yeah, they do
Everything
need
we
to get
table.
on that part.
Give them a chance to come together, give all of you guys a chance to go in there and make, like I said, like, what if it bisects a neighborhood, right? I know you guys did a great job on it, but just, y'all need to check it up close with the JS guys. And then that gets here, we all agree, and then folks in the public get to see that coming up to it, and then they have at least a week to digest it. Because I mean, I completely respect that you guys were done on late Thursday, and then Friday everything had to be done and listed or whatever, and you made the decision that I don't get calls at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, somebody screaming me something I never read.
Right.
That was wonderful, but if we give folks that are gonna live with this thing a week, I'm willing to meet any time of any day, right? So that we can see what y'all come up with, because like I said, it's y'all's area, I don't wanna get between you. And then we give people in the community a week before we have a final. I think that's doable in 30 days, right?
All this language updated that we just voted, the clean version of the language too.
That's a question for clarification from us. Do you want to see the red line document at third reading, or do you want the clean version at third reading?
All the new stuff should be indicated.
Obviously red.
Keep it red line?
Yeah, use blue though, county colors.
I have
Sure.
a question. We had council rules where we couldn't pass anything major. So many,
It was a budgetary rule you're talking about. I remember that rule.
well, anything that had, it was, so as a council rule, we changed when it first came on. Because, but that was in an election year when you had
Yeah, that was
people
when
come
council
on.
was changing over. Y'all were not changing.
No, we're not changing over. I just wanna make sure we don't have to suspend the council rules. Cool.
So I have a motion on the table.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Motion withdrawn. Other discussion? No other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I need to address council first. I know we are using terms of art in this room. The word zoning is a term of art. We do not need to use that. We are not doing zoning. We are doing a development standard ordinance. You can call it what you want, but for legal purposes, this is a developmental standard ordinance. We're not saying we're not regulating the use of property. We're doing standardization of what subdivisions can be where, okay? And I would ask the council to be cognizant of that fact, because if you did do zoning countywide, you would be going through a whole different process in regulating the use of every piece of property. That's not what we're doing. I want council to understand that, and I understand that you were doing everything countywide, but it is heritage areas, development overlays that you've done before, like on Highway 11. So it's not zoning. It is a developmental standard ordinance. Okay, I thought that appropriate to say, so that our record, when somebody comes in and said you just zoned the whole county and you didn't do it properly, we can say, no, we did developmental standards ordinance, because that is what you're doing. That is the process that you're going through.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. I do have, a thought that goes with the idea behind planning, and we've talked in great detail about annexation, unchecked annexation. I believe there have been people sitting in this room today that has talked about to all of us about unchecked annexation. And there's no legal mechanism for unchecked annexation. There's nothing that we can do to hinder or slow down efforts of annexation. State law does allow us to have a city-county joint planning commission, which I feel like very much goes in line with our UDSO and that being a living, breathing document. It allows for a non-siloed approach at looking at the UDSO and development across the county, because let's just all be very honest. If it weren't for the municipalities, I don't know that we'd really be discussing all of this, and it would have caused such great anxiety. To prevent haphazard growth, there's been recent elections where campaigns were won and ran on about stopping growth, slowing growth, hindering growth, whatever. And I think it's important to note that. So I'd actually like to make the motion to call on the municipalities to impose a 180-day annexation moratorium with the option of a 90-day extension. It's what it seems is wanted in the communities. Pause will allow us to work with the existing leadership, the new leadership from the municipalities, to work together on a path forward for a joint countywide planning commission. Also, in my motion, want to, I don't want to say put on notice, but ask the county staff to, over the next 90 days, research and come back with recommendations of what this would look like, what it would take, report back to this council, as well as municipal leadership. That way the cities do have skin in the game. They can't say they don't have skin in the game, but that is my motion, that we send that to the municipalities as a resolution at our next council meeting.
Second.
Discussion on the motion.
So there are places across the country where the countywide government offers these types of services. Jacksonville, Dallas, Fort Worth, where they basically, they went to the furthest possible extreme where the municipality is not necessarily a separate entity. The county is providing majority services. But there's a big balance in the middle there because Jim Wilkie. Jim Wilkie had brought in a governmental entity or an entity to come in and talk about how we could push back on the EPA coming in. And his principal argument was that there's no coordination. And he pulled the sewer maps. And he showed where there was no plan. And he went to a countywide municipal meeting or whatnot, and everybody talked about planning, and nobody talked about doing it together. And here we are 13 years later, and it's even worse, right? So to me, a countywide planning commission is something I've talked about since I lived in Jacksonville, because it puts all of us on the same front. And there's so many easy ways to make that representative. I think that's a wonderful idea. That's ideal. Good job, Chris.
Any other discussion?
You're asking the municipalities to do a 180-day moratorium on
annexation. I'm not asking them not to build, I'm asking them not to annex until we can come together and discuss and look at implementing this countywide planning commission. And the details of what that planning commission would look like will have to come from our staff, giving them 90 days to come back and tell us what it looks like. And if you look at it, the first 90 days is research, homework. Is it doable? How's it doable? What does it look like? The next 90 days is selling it to the municipalities and asking the municipalities to sign on board.
Okay. I like the spirit behind it. My only concern is I know that Clemson has sometimes had a frustration where the reason they're annexing is because a utility is being paid for or not paid for, and they feel backed in a corner. But 180 days doesn't feel like too long, and the spirit of it is to have countywide planning, so I understand where you're coming from. I guess it's going to be optional for them to follow it with it.
100%.
Yeah,
make them do it, but
it's a call for cooperation.
That's exactly what it is. Everybody wants to work together. Everybody wants to pin the other guy. I just want to get everybody to the same table, and let's try to tackle this together. That way we're not blaming one another.
So I think it's important because the Linhart Grove neighborhood, I called the mayor and said, hey, you guys are going to let these folks put more houses in here, and the prescription is they got to run the traffic out the second entrance that you gave them. You said you didn't have a second entrance even though it was needed. And they're going to run it through Millstone, and Millstone's only got 20 houses. And now you're going to have 200 or 300 houses that will be traveling out and back through Millstone. And so, yes, the county basically stepped in and said you'd have to bring the road up to current standards and all this other stuff. And when I called the mayor, you may remember this, I called the mayor and said, if I donate a gate that my guys fabricated and have the folks from Millstone go out there and re-put it up and buy a lock and give it to the EMS folks, which is emergency entrance, which is what was actually required by law, there'll be an entrance. So the need for emergency access or whatever would be there, and everybody would have keys. And we'll put the gate on the county land, which is about 2 feet from the curb that's there. And he said, no, we won't let them have their building permit because they won't have the second entrance. And as well, I believe that we could put it on county land, and they would have an entrance. And he goes, well, what if somebody parks a boat down there and blocks it? So he was going to tell the developer they couldn't have the properties, and we couldn't do that. So it's, what do you do? Do you block, the 200 people, or do you block the 20? And then there's a decision that has to be made at that point. And when I push the mayor on it, the mayor says, well, we can talk about that once you start giving me some road money. It's the principal reason why, that kind of a tit for tat was, I think, one of the reasons why his showing wasn't so great in the recent election. And in this board, I've never been asked to give you something to get a vote, ever on this board. I don't recall it ever on the school district board. The issue that I see is the opportunity to avoid having me flip out like I did and call Ken, because I just thought that was egregious. And it's not even related arguments, and it's for these folks that they're in the county, and you're going to put their road through it, and they have no choice in it. If we can plan together, we can avoid that, because it was going to come down between the councilman and the mayor of Easley, having a contest, right? That is not a position nobody on our board needs to be in, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. And so then I had to go walk, Linhart Grove and talk to all the folks there. And it's a decision: do I still put the gate up, right? And then you block all those folks trying to get out of that neighborhood that the city of Easley planning guys or whatever decided that they could build. It is not somewhere that we don't need that to happen. Y'all don't need to have to live through that. You don't need to have to try to communicate to 20 households of people that they're screwed, and it's not people that they get to vote for that's screwed. And then those folks in Millstone called the city, and the city blamed it on Henry. I didn't get a vote in any of that processes, but Tommy and the mayor told the people in Millstone that they needed to take it up with me. Remember when I first called you? So all I'm asking for here is what he's talking about is an accountable board, an accountable group that eliminates this craziness that we're living with, which led to one of the nastiest election cycles we've had here in 20 years.
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. Any other discussion tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, please signify by raising your hand.